You're listening to Against All Odds, my face-to-face discussions with everyday people who inspire.
You know, you walk in, you go through reception, you get put in your cell, and my first cellmate was Ivan Milat. He was on remand, he'd just been arrested. And my first 3 nights was, sleeping in the same cell as a serial killer that we now know is a pretty twisted unit.
My name's Odell Odds Harris, and in today's episode of Against All Odds, I have Brent Simpson. We sat on one of our favourite beaches on the Gold Coast and discussed his checkered past, what he's learnt from his former life, and how he's making a real positive impact on his community in the form of a foundation he's set up. So turn up your volume, settle in, and enjoy the episode.
Yeah, the charity is the Heavy Hiterz Foundation. We support people living with mental illness. We also provide workshops. We also look after people who have lost loved ones to suicide and try and prevent other suicides occurring.
You're a big proponent for lived experience and helping people that way. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, we have a lot of clinicians, as we call it, you know, professionals that like to diagnose us and, take things from textbooks that have been obviously created over many, many, many years. And it's not always the right information. It's not always the right medication. It's not always the right diagnosis. So as a man that lives with type 2 bipolar, I think it's extremely important to be heard on how it is to live with a mental illness.
Yep.
Hence the lived experience. We strongly base ourselves around lived experience because I believe that there's so much value in somebody's actual living, you know, their life and what they've truly been through, as opposed to what we read. You know, what we read in these books, which is, look, don't get me wrong, we need these professionals, but I truly believe that people need to be heard and their experiences need to be taken into account, and then we can start to look at better ways to, better living with mental illness.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience, where it all started?
Yeah, so for me, it goes back, I'm 41, so we're going back well over 30 years, 30 plus. But for me, it started off growing up in a predominantly Indigenous community. I'm non-Indigenous, but I grew up around that environment. It was a tough environment to grow up around. Sort of always had to sort of keep your hands up, keep your shoes on your feet, as I've always said. But, it made you resilient, and that was how it was. But life wasn't real good as a young person. My parents had parted ways at a very young age. It was quite a violent upbringing in that respect, more just my father with alcohol issues, and, he was a hard worker, but he was a very angry man. But it led to me sort of running away from home and being taken out of home. And around that time, there was a lot of sexual abuse. I was abused ongoing for on and off nearly 2 years by neighbours surrounding where we lived, which was very, very hard to deal with, especially when, you sort of try and tell someone that it's happening, and basically you have the shit beaten out of you because you said it by the person you trusted most to be able to, protect you. So, that amongst growing up in the violence and feeling very alone within the community that I was living sort of set the path for what led to many, many years of living on the streets, violence, jail.
Did you feel alone because you're non-Indigenous in an Indigenous
Look,
environment?
I definitely felt the outsider. I mean, that's 100%. I absolutely, I stood out like a sore thumb, a skinny white fella in a black fella's community. So, it was just the way it was. Would I change it? Would I go back and wish it was any different? No. But it was tough living.
I'm sure there'd be aspects you'd want to change.
Oh, look, I mean, what do you do? At 41 years of age, you dealt the cards, you just play with them, So to go back and sort of ask for a reshuffle, well, it's not realistic. And I am where I am right now talking to you because of the path that I've walked and, the cards that I've been dealt in life.
So what happened when you left school and sort of...
Yeah, well, school was a little bit null and void. I was troublesome at school, I think, from about the age of 10. primary schools. I'd chopped and changed a few, and coming into year 6, I really had no stability. I was the kid that everyone knew had issues and had problems, but no one knew what the real truth was going on behind the closed doors. And it was back then. Families weren't seen to be so public about divorces and things like that. A child coming from a broken home was always a troublesome child, and we can't have him at your birthday party, and no, he can't come over and play, he might steal something, or you're always looked down at, I guess, in that respect. So then it became a very lonely road. There wasn't a lot of out, and yeah, definitely you do feel very alienated and very alone.
Did you turn to violence then, or do you think you had some sort of bipolar then?
Nah, look, I had no idea what bipolar was back then. I didn't even know what, mental illness was, let alone feel it. Was I angry? Absolutely. Violent. I was that kid that was always a bit bigger, so, I always sort of got set up or picked out that, let's get him or let's do this. So, it was never the one-on-one sort of street scuffle or, fair brawl. It was always getting sent in, and, the bigger kids would come and circle me, and their tough guy would come in, and the moment I started to sort of stand my ground, next minute I'd get jumped by 3 or 4 of them, and it was fun for them, because I had no one to protect me, I had no one to defend me, I had nowhere to turn. People knew that basically I was a street kid with no support. So, I guess we call it bullying today. It was bullying back then, but a little bit different.
Yeah, I think bullying is a different term these days.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a little less. You can call a bullier with a little less bullying these days.
Yeah. Back in the day, it was you got your freaking head punched in. You know what I mean? And you were bullied by groups of punks.
I think probably the difference in bullying these days is it doesn't stop now with the internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can happen 24/7 once you go home from school or whatever that environment is.
Absolutely, and I think I spent last week up at Brisbane in this National Suicide Prevention annual conference, and I went to a place called Your Town, which is the founders of the Kids Helpline. 27 years they've been going, and I didn't know. I knew that existed. I didn't know really what they do, and such an amazing organisation and non-government funded, and it's there and it's happening and it's making such good progress with our young people. And we're looking at statistics about suicide and mental illness and the age groups, and the bullying is a massive part of today, which then affects people's mental wellness, which then leads to suicide in a lot of cases with young people, and we're talking as young as 10 and 11. It's very different to walking down the street and getting jumped from your shoes by a bunch of bullies or your push bike stolen off you like it used to be back in the day.
Yeah, it's like a constant harassment now, isn't it?
Mate,
it's more sort of a mental anguish than a physical.
People just
than back then.
Physically you got broken, but you got back up and just turned up again tomorrow and showed them that you weren't scared, and you prepared for another flogging, or you'd end up giving one of them a flogging. But the turning point, I think, back then for me was, I'll never forget it, and I won't go too far into it, but, I used to take the same route daily, walk through this park, and this crew of fellas would always be there, a bit older, always on the drink, and the old glass Coke bottles, I picked up a 500ml one, and I come through with a brand new pair of Nike Air Huaraches on that I'd just stolen from InSport, I think it was, or something I did back then, put them on and just run. And, I didn't have any money to buy them, but anyway. So, I've walked through the park, and next thing you know, they sure as hell come out wanting my new shoes, and I pulled the old glass bottle out and, went to war with it and never was touched again. So, I truly believe when we talk about bullying, sometimes you do have to stand up. I don't think to that extreme, but, that was a little bit different. But, they seem to thrive off the energy and the negativity that they get from people who they, belittle and demoralise.
And what did your life look like after that? Where did you head to from there?
She was pretty hectic, pretty dark. I mean, look, my life led to a lot of crime, a lot of street gang. You got to remember, I back then was a young man that was, and I can say this now, I didn't acknowledge that back then, but I was a scared boy growing into a man's body. Totally broken, fearful, complete protection mode the whole time. I didn't trust anybody. Anybody that came near me, I was, the moment I'd sense any sense of untoward coming to me, I'd attack. And it cost me a lot of years in boys' homes through a lot of heavy assaults and violent crimes, which, then also led to me a lot of alcohol and drug abuse back then, I guess to drown the pain. And, with then came a zero care for anything. Next thing you know, I'm, jumping bank counters. We were called the Banky Boys back in the day, which was a term that they used before they put the shutters up and everything. We used to just pull up in a hottie out the front and pile out of the car, run in the bank, jump straight over the counters and just grab what we could out of the drawers and straight back over.
Because they made those shutters for you boys, didn't they?
They did. Yeah, they definitely made it. It was a big thing. It was a big thing back in the day, and cost us a couple of years out of our life in jail for those sort of crimes. But it was what it was back then, and we didn't actually harm anyone. Not that I'm condoning it. Don't get me wrong, but it was just a way of life. We sort of stole from the rich and go back to the poor, sort of thing, and the rich was the banks.
Hey, you touched on going to prison. My stepfather, I don't know if you've listened to my story, but my stepfather was a copper. My dad had been in prison, and they both were really adamant, me growing up, that I would, I should never go to prison. That was the one thing I should never do. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience, especially the first day?
Yeah, for me, I'd already had a taste coming through boys' homes, so I'd done, the best part of 3.5 years as a young person before I'd even turned 18. It then obviously led at 18 to becoming an adult, and the continuation of serious violent crimes led me straight into jail. There was no, oh look, you got 12 months probation and this sort of shit. It was just habitual offender, see you later. So my first trip was to Long Bay. Long Bay jails had many, 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 many years of history. It's a scary place. It's a very old jail, and it's very cold, if I can put it that way, and dark in every way. The place is just, that's not a nice place. You walk in, you go through reception, you get put in your cell, and my first cellmate was Ivan Milat. He was on remand. He'd just been arrested. And my first 3 nights was, sleeping in the same cell as a serial killer that we now know is a pretty twisted unit. So, did I know really much about him back then? And, no, I didn't. You come to jail, you shut your mouth. You just, you don't speak unless you're spoken to, especially sort of new kid off the block. Get in there and want a gangster on, you're going to meet gangsters and you're going to meet your fate and your maker. So, I sort of learnt from a very young age, you just mind your own business and just shuffle along, as they say. Do your laps.
What did you do when you got out of there?
Reoffended, mate. Look, it didn't put the fear of God in me, by any means. I sort of got out of there and started, I was always hanging around with a lot of outlaw motorcycle gangs, and at a very young age, and I guess I was a young up-and-coming guy with plenty of ticker that they knew that, could get shit done, so to speak. And, I could turn $1 into $2, and that was the next path that I started walking, was that gang life and mentality that, stuck with me for many, 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 many years on.
What brought about a change in you then? Actually, before we go into that, as an ex-convict or prisoner, do you think there's a place in society for prisons still? What do you think's a better way?
For prison or for prisoners?
For prison, do you think it's a way for, it's an old way of rehabilitation?
I don't believe it rehabilitates anybody. Look, we need prisons. I won't, there's no point lying about that. We have some sick units in this world that, I guess sometimes should be no longer here with us on this planet due to their crimes. But no, I don't think personally that it rehabilitates anybody. It can just totally destroy a person. It can, kill a person. It's everybody's vulnerable. I don't care who you are, how bad and big you think you are, in there, someone's having a bad day walking around with a shiv and you say something the wrong way, you're going to get stabbed. And then especially somebody that's doing, a solid sentence, they're not going to care. The attitude in there is, you're on your own, basically. I mean, today there's a lot of gangs and, a lot of crew that feel that they have to be a part of that to survive. And in some cases, it's true, but I don't think in any way, shape or form, I think it's building more criminality than reducing it.
So they go in and be a better criminal when they come out.
Oh, look, it's... Look, I've always said, a smart criminal never gets caught. So I wasn't real smart, even though I thought I was. And there was, I guess most of them that have been caught. But, it's a school. The school of hard knocks, as they say. A lot of people grow to notoriety from there. A lot of people, glorify off it. They meet other inmates that, have high profiles and stuff like that. And, the next thing they idolise and they want to be just like that person. So to do that, they come out and they reoffend and they try and reoffend bigger and better than they've ever done.
So you lived that lifestyle for a few years and you had that. What turned it around for you?
Yeah, look, so my last major sentence, I was looking at 10 years. I was done for commercial importation. I had prepared myself for double figures. I, at that stage, was the father of a young boy. My wife, she was just over 4 months pregnant when I was arrested with our second little, our third. God, time flies. So I had my daughter and my son already, and my daughter was quite young, and my wife was pregnant with our second, and my oldest son was to a previous partner. And, I'd sort of become accustomed to the thought that they were going to just have to move on, and I wasn't going to be a part of their life as such for the next however many years. So, I'd spent nearly a year on remand to be finally given a sentence of 6 years, which I thought was excellent. I don't know anybody that would probably be happy with that, but circumstances and what I'd prepared myself for, and the way that the federal police pushed the case, I don't think it was too bad a result. So in that time, it took me a good few years to be able to accept it. I spent, the best part of 12 months in Segro. I was gang affiliated. In segregation. So in the gang units, STU, basically for no one, I just didn't conform. Simple as that. I was aggressive, abusive, had attacked sort of screws. And as I said, earlier in our chat about people not giving a damn once they get to a certain point in there, and that's how I was. I sort of got this mentality that, stay sort of away from me, or this is what's sort of going to happen. And it was a fear, I guess, too, of someone else doing the same to me. Your guard's up. But then I guess that time in Segro was good for me because, you're locked down basically 22, 23 hours a day. Over the course of 12 months, you start to think about what you want to do in your life. And in that time, 2 men have taken their lives on that run. And you don't see them. You only yell out to each other. You don't mix with anyone. There are other high-profile inmates. Like we had ways and means of doing things, but you physically didn't get to sit down and have a chat with anyone and talk to anyone. So, the first thing we hear that someone had taken their life was the detectives knocking on our door, opening the cell door, saying, mate, so-and-so has passed on. Did you hear anything? It's like, I didn't hear a thing. And you don't, but right there and then I think was the realities of this is where it's going. I can either go down this road, especially as a survivor of 3 suicide attempts in my life.
Your own suicide attempts? Absolutely.
Were
they in prison?
No, not at all. No, they were outside. But it was like a trigger point for me. I could have quite easily just said, no, I'm going to sink and, end it all right there and then and take the pain away from my loved ones still out here and my kids. But then again, at the same time too, am I really, or am I giving them a life sentence by making that choice? So I chose to start to swim. And I thought, this needs to change, people's lives need to stop going because of hardships and darkness. And for me, I started to put in a plan that is now growing daily and is a national charity called the Heavy Hiterz Foundation, and that's almost 5 years on from my release, or 4.5 years, and it's been a long, tough road. I had 3 years parole when I was released, and I was, I guess, unable to go and do the things that what most normal people do. It was very hard to get work. It's very hard I wasn't able to travel. I live on a border town, so I wasn't allowed to cross borders. My oldest son lived across the border. There was a lot against me that could have pushed me into that corner of reoffending again and not giving a flying fuck. You know what I mean? Like I just said, look, I'm against the system. But I chose to, I guess for the first time in my life, stop and reevaluate and find a positive in it. And started working towards some wonderful goals and little successes that are growing.
Tell me about some of those goals and success stories.
Yeah, so for me, first of all, was successfully understanding my mental illness, successfully accepting the trauma that I had suffered as a child through sexual and physical abuse, successfully learning how to become a father.
Mate, can I just ask about that? Successfully accepting about the abuse when you're a child. Is one of those steps accepting that it's not your fault?
Oh, look, I definitely don't think that it's any child's fault that, go through any of that sort of abuse.
I think it's some people with that having happened to them have a form of guilt.
Yeah.
For the listeners out there, is that a form of rehab, accepting it's not your fault?
I think the word is not being a victim. Yes, I mean, in a roundabout way, definitely. It's not your fault, and knowing that you don't have to feel guilty about it. And I after 30 odd years decided to speak out about it again after being shut down many, many years ago as a child about it. And I had never felt a weight lift off my shoulders the way it did. And it was one of them things that it wasn't my fault. And I'm not the victim, and I'm not going to sit here and have my life wrecked because of the actions of somebody else.
Have those guys been brought to justice at all?
No, and unfortunately, I guess karma will bite them in the ass one day. I won't lie to you, I'd sat in jail waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I guess that was something that could have turned the tables, a big turn. I could have been still there right now and looking at a lot more years, because the way I was thinking, especially within those first few years of, accepting that I was in jail, and as I said to you, I was quite a loose cannon. I would have had no problem in taking one of them or two of them out, and I mean completely out. So almost a blessing in disguise that they probably haven't been charged and I've never seen them, and whether they're alive today, I have no idea. But it's something that I have to live with, but it's not something that I choose to constantly ponder on or think about.
Back to your goals and your success stories. Tell me a little bit about some success you've had with the foundation, aside from your thousands of mile ride and all that sort of stuff. I mean, some stories from some of your members.
Yeah, I mean, that one's a little bit of a tough point, because I mean, we've truly got to respect those that reach out, and those that ask for the support and the help. But I can honestly say that the people themselves that have, so we have a closed group, a community group that has just under 4,000 worldwide, which is a network of support 24/7. It's a closed group for a reason, and that's for the respect of privacy and stuff like that. But it's definitely written on those pages the gratitude that people have for still being here today, for the Heavy Hiterz Foundation community page, which allows people to reach out at any hour of any day and know that they're not alone, and that there is someone out there with lived experience that could share support or share their journey and trying to bring that person back from that dark place, which it's there. As I said, they've put it up there, and their gratitude and appreciation for the community that we've created. So it's pretty powerful.
Do you find in that community that it's more male than female? Or is it?
Look, it's a good question, because I often get asked, do you sort of do things for just male mental health, or do you do things for this? And to me, suicide and mental illness doesn't discriminate. It can attack anyone at any time. We all have it in us, depending on our traumas. In saying that, though, you don't always have to have a mental illness to be suicidal and have suicidal tendencies. So, when do you know? You don't. At any moment, it could affect any one of us. So, the key point is just knowing that there is support.
Can I just ask, since your diagnosis, well, how did you get diagnosed first off? It wasn't inside? Was it?
Oh, well, no. I did have to go through a forensic doctor there anyway before my sentencing. But, just before I went to jail, probably about a year or two, my wife had sort of pulled me up. I was still dark into the club scene. I'd leave on a Friday and be at the clubhouse from Friday to Sunday. And sometimes still go on Monday. So my mind probably wasn't in the best place ever, and I wasn't the nicest person at times. And my wife sort of said to me, "You need to get your shit together. You need to get help." And I think at that stage I'd realised that I was heading down a one-way street of destruction, and it was really going to hurt me and really hurt a lot of people around me that do care. So we did some research on the internet, because I was sort of, why am I feeling like this? These are the signs. This is what I'm going through. And all of a sudden, this title of bipolar was starting to be spoken of. Now, having been forensically diagnosed, it is type 2 bipolar. And the two differences are from one extreme to the other, but all relate around a combination of depression, anxiety, some really, really tough sort of mental battles. And, it all began there pretty much with the whole medication thing. So, it was, I'd been given medication as a young person, but never really stuck to it and never felt any positive sort of change from it. When my wife and I went to the doctors, and, the doctor said, "Look, we agree. We think that, this is bipolar and this is what we're going to do." It was a long, long road to where I am today. Many years of wrong medications, a lot of tough battles within my own head. And,
So what's your advice? Because you're not, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you're not the norm of, you're not
Fuck the norm.
But you know what I mean. You're not the norm.
No one likes a sheep.
Of seeking advice, and if someone sees that you've sought advice and that you've sought professional help, maybe they'll seek it.
Absolutely. Yep, definitely reach out. It's okay to not be okay. Ask me, 10 years ago, I would never have even had this conversation, let alone talk to you about my deepest, darkest, thoughts. Today, I have no issue with sitting down, having this conversation, listening to others and helping. And, if I can be that person, or someone through our linking services can be that person that you turn to, great. If not, then, go and seek professional help, or go and talk to a doctor and get medicated. I wouldn't be okay at the moment had I not educated myself on my mental illness, gone through taking the medication to be able to find a balance, to then, have a better way of living with my mental illness. I've still got it. I'll have it for the rest of my life. I still wake up sometimes wishing I wasn't here, and that's how it is. That's the roller coaster of mental illness, but there is a brighter day.
So you got bipolar type 2?
Type 2.
And just explain to the listeners what that is. So it's a manic and a depressive?
Yep. So for me, I do... oh dear. I do everything to the extreme. I have hyper moments where I take things, over and above, and then I have super dark lows. So, at the moment, I like to put it in perspective. I'm okay. I'm sitting pretty balanced, but I'm fighting, back to fighting Muay Thai. I'm about to embark on another cycling journey, and I do these endurance events more for my mental wellness, but to raise awareness for others that aren't strong enough to have a voice. And I couldn't do what I do without understanding my bipolar and knowing that I can use that as a positive to be able to be greater than I am at any one stage, which I know it sounds weird, like superhero powers, but when you're 130 kilos and, you're 6 foot and you're climbing, hundreds and hundreds of meters up mountains on a push bike, or you're cycling across Australia and, pissing down rain and fucking headwinds, with a fractured elbow, and it's all in the head, and once you understand that bipolar is a tough mental illness, as are all, but once you start to find the ways of using it to your advantage, it's manageable.
It's sort of like a gift.
My wife won't tell you that, but it is.
Just on that, man, what's your advice for any support networks or, supportive support people in relationships with others that have bipolar? Yeah,
look, it's a tough call. Look, if I can be really honest about it, it's fucking high maintenance. I praise anybody that's able to stick by somebody with a mental illness, for starters, especially if they're not willing to get help themselves. It's important that, to continue a healthy relationship, that person needs to understand what their mental illness is and seek the right help, because it will destroy. It will destroy. And, to what extreme and what level, God only knows that. But it can be very dangerous. So, be honest, be open. If you're starting a relationship, obviously, the first thing you don't want to tell the person you're starting to start a relationship is, oh, hey, I got bipolar and I'm unmedicated. I'm a fucking madman. You know what I mean? Like, you ain't going to get no love back for that. But, I think honesty is the biggest key. And two, people are a little bit more resilient these days, a bit more understanding. And I think that the more that we talk about it, people are educating themselves around it and knowing that, it is okay to not be okay, and that, a positive support network can be really healthy.
Yeah, it's a lot less stigma around the whole mental illness topic.
Yeah, I mean,
especially in the last probably 3 years, I reckon.
Definitely. And I think, too, the more that we see men and women who, people respect, or people that have a connection with, standing up and actually sharing their lived experience. Look, I truly believe that it's lived experience that's knocking down this stigma. People are starting to understand what it's like through people with lived experience, because how else do you explain it? The textbook ain't going to tell you what it's like living in my head.
Yeah, that's right.
But my wife will tell you.
Yeah.
And I think that there needs to be more support networks out there for those who support people living with a mental illness. I don't feel that the people that are our strength, I guess, and backbone get enough gratitude in respect to what they go through. It's, it'd be fucking hard. It'd be hard. I don't know if I'd live with me. A little bit contradictory to what I'm saying, but, I've got to be honest. I know that I care and that I love and that I'm a humble man, but I'm also a real prick at times, I suppose, and selfish, self-centered, and depending on what my episode is and how manic I become on whatever it is that I'm doing, So I think understanding and, us as people needing that support need to respect those that support us. And, like my wife says to me sometimes, I get tired. I get drawn, like, you are high maintenance. Well, I'm high maintenance because, unfortunately, she doesn't always know what face is going to be, worn from day to day. So, when you actually stop and you think about that, it's kind of heartbreaking, because you don't want that person to ever have to feel that way, especially when you truly love them and you've spent, like, so many positive times together. And the mental illness can destroy all that within a second, and at some stage that person may sooner or later just turn around and go, I have had enough. And the moment that occurs, and everybody has that right to walk away. I'm not saying that anybody should feel obligated to stick by somebody just purely because they feel sorry for them. Not at all. But, once that person with the mental illness realizes that way of life or their choices have destroyed something that was, so great in their life. She's a pretty downward spiral.
Yeah, you slip back into that mental illness.
Yeah.
So in closing, brother, is there anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, definitely, mate. I think that our future is in the hands of, obviously the next generation, our young people. Unfortunately, we're seeing such a high increase in suicidal tendencies and the loss of life, and mental illness is growing daily in statistics. And I truly, would love to see our young people be able to be comfortable to come out and truly speak up and know that you don't have to be brave and wear a patch or, you know what I mean, be the tough guy or tough girl. It's okay to open up and ask for help. Your podcast here is Against All Odds. And it truly is. Life can throw you a curveball at times and you feel that it's all against you. But there is a way that you can come out of it. And we need our young people to start believing in themselves. Start realizing that they can achieve anything. This ice epidemic and the suicide epidemic at the moment within this generation of young people is just, it's crazy. We've never seen anything like it before. So if we can get some of those strong young people out there to just start leading with their lived experience, it's okay. It's okay to say that, you've been down that road, but use it as a positive. If you've been down that road, if you're a survivor of a suicide attempt, if you live with a mental illness and you see somebody out there that's struggling or you feel that will know that they've attempted or something, go up and share your story with them. Talk about it. Because you'll be surprised how many people will actually sit down, drop their shoulders in relaxed state and just actually feel at peace knowing that they're not alone. Our motto is you are not alone. And I truly believe we need to keep pushing that message out there.
Where can people find out about your foundation and follow your journey? Because as I said, or as you said, you've got a ride coming up and you've got a fight coming up. And not only to raise awareness, but also raise money. Absolutely.
I keep putting my life on the line to try and keep the charity going. We're a non-for-profit, non-government funded charity. We're a registered national charity. All donations are totally tax deductible. And, for me to continue what I'm doing, my attitude is I've got to back myself. So whilst we're always out there seeking donations and seeking more funding, you've got to keep being active and keep going forward. So, we have our website, which has a lot of information on it. We do workshops. So, if you go to www.heavyhiterz.org, HEAVYHITERZ.org. Our pages too on all our social medias, you'll find either under Brent Simpson or the Heavy Hiterz Foundation. Get on board, guys. We truly are making massive inroads to better living and mental wellness. And that's not just me saying it, that's truly coming from people themselves. They put up their own testimonies within our community and, we are making a massive difference. And, to see what we do and know the lives that we're actually connecting with and saving on a daily basis with no funding keeps me really, really bright about the day that we do actually get, some serious funding behind us to be able to push on and really start getting out there to the wider the community, especially nationally, and delivering our workshops and, providing more support.
Cool, brother.
Thank you very much for having me on this wonderful podcast. I've been wanting to get on it for quite a while now. And odds are, mate, you're an absolute champion.
Thanks, brother.
Keep up the great work, buddy.
All right, great to have you on. Thanks for sharing, man.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, bro. I hope you found this episode with Brent Simpson helpful. If it resonated with you, please pass it on and share it with someone. In the next episode, I have Matthew Cox, a self-confessed gambling addict, done good.
The times that I really liked gambling the most was when I was gambling alone, sitting there with those chips. There's nothing in the world that can numb me, like gambling.
Stay tuned to the next episode, and again, if you want to contact me, please do so on Instagram @SenseiOdell or @Against All Odds Podcast. Remember, everyone's got their own battles. Stay humble, stay kind, stay smiling. Odds out.